What's up, y'all? Today I want to tell you about a piece of environmental policy that we were able to propose to our municipality here in Lexington, Kentucky. This did get passed, and I'm not going to bury the lead. What we were able to do is create a dedicated pool of funding for the establishment of new urban tree canopy using money from a statutorily mandated utility management fee that everyone in the city has to pay into. So obviously this video is going to be about kind of the little details of local environmental policy, and if you're not into that, no hard feelings. But my hope is that sharing this experience is going to be uniquely valuable to those of you who maybe want to do something like this in your own community. So I'm going to try to be as concise as possible while still really hitting the details of what our thinking was and how we went about doing this. All right. So if you're still with me, we're going to begin with a little bit of a history lesson. Back in 2006, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency sued the city of Lexington, Kentucky over violations to the Clean Water Act. Now, this sounds terrible, but it was happening to cities all over this region. Louisville, Indianapolis, Cincinnati. This wasn't necessarily unique to Lexington. But a big part of the problem were combined sanitary sewer overflows, aging stormwater infrastructure, all kinds of problems that were leading to sanitary sewer discharges into waterways. Sediment control wasn't being properly enforced. All these kinds of different water quality issues that resolve themselves in this thing called the consent decree, which is a legal judgment against the municipality that sets out a number of things that they had to do to make the violations correct. And a part of this, maybe the biggest part of this from my perspective, is that everyone had to start paying in 2011, about 15 years ago, everyone had to start paying a utility management fee, a stormwater quality management fee that was added to whatever bills they were already paying for the property where they lived. And some of this money, not all of it, but some of it was used to establish a new stormwater quality infrastructure incentive grants program. So this is a fantastic program. It's funded a bunch of really cool projects all over town. Geomancer has certainly benefited from it. But it's also been funny to watch over the preceding decade how different organizations have shifted their mission statements to become all about water quality, because that's what you have to do if you're going to chase after this money, right? And that's an artifact of the grant funding structure, is that we kind of create these artificial frameworks that we then have to limbo ourselves around if we're going to access this money. So that's fine. We can play that game, but there are some limitations to this, often unintentional limitations that we would rather not have to work around. So here's an example of that. If you looked at the scoring matrix for the grant, the standards that they use to rank who has the strongest applications, you would see that the only thing they're really awarding points to is a reduction in impervious surface area by square foot on the property. And so what this means is that this grant program was really good for people like engineers and architects who want to basically just put green roofs and pervious paver parking lots everywhere. But it wasn't doing anything for people like me who think that evapotranspiration and urban tree canopy is core to restoring our impacted water cycle. So I do want to stress that I don't think that this is like a malicious oversight in the policy. It's just something that happens, right? Whenever you have these imperfect sort of governmental structures trying to put together these programs, inevitably they are going to miss out on something. But this is really important. I have spent a significant part of my career talking about evapotranspiration and teaching people about how important it is to our water cycle and to ecological processes on this planet more generally. But unfortunately, evapotranspiration is something that can be pretty hard to measure. Unlike things like canopy interception and infiltration that we have really good data on, Evapotranspiration requires more sophisticated, more sensitive instruments to get measurements on, and so that has made a lot of people over the years, including engineers, just sort of write it off and not include it in their calculations when they're considering things like tree canopy. So what we needed was a way to have evapotranspiration accounted for in the policy and correctly valued in this grant program. Well, it turns out that we already had, in a completely different ordinance related to new developments, some different categories of canopy trees where we could put different species into different size classes and award a certain square footage value to them. Now, this is really important because even though this particular ordinance had nothing to do with the division of water quality, it was something already codified in local government statute that gives us some sort of measurement, some sort of equivalent square footage to a tree. So you see where I'm going with this, right? We have a calculation awarding points to a grant applicant based on the square footage of impervious surface area they have removed. And then we have some calculations related to the square footage of tree canopy provided by different species. So why can we not value the establishment of new tree canopy at the same rate or even more than we value the reduction in impervious surface area by equivalent square footage? That is the crux of what we propose to the city. So I typed this proposal up and secured letters of support from the Lexington Tree Board and a well-respected environmental engineer at the University of Kentucky. Then I brought this proposal to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Water Quality Fees Board, which is the governmental body that administers the grant program. I think the presentation went pretty well, and of course I had sent the proposal to them ahead of time for their consideration. Now I do want to play you one clip from this meeting, even though it's not the greatest cinematography. But this has to do with a question I received regarding the coefficient that we wanted to attach to the valuing of tree canopy. This is a really important point because the way that we wrote the proposal, we were actually wanting to value tree canopy establishment at 150% or 1.5 times the amount attributed to reduction in impervious surface area. So in other words, we wanted to incentivize the establishment of new urban tree canopy more so than just putting in pervious pavers. Let's take a listen.
First, I want to say, well done on the packet. You gave us your idea, how to implement it, you kind of pro-con yourself, and then a lot of supporting documentation. So very well prepared and really appreciate that. I think this is only the second time we've really had a public comment in a few years. So thanks for being here and very well done on the packet. I am curious though, the multiplier here of 1.5, how do you arrive at that?
Yeah, so looking you right in the face, I have to tell you there's subjectivity in that. But I think there are a number of arguments that can be made in support of that. I will say though that it's another strength of the proposal that if you want to tweak that in years ahead, if you want to change it, that is a single point that is pretty easy. But in terms of 1.5, obviously what we're doing is incentivizing it. We're saying that it's going to be awarded more so than reduction in impervious surface area. So what are the arguments for that? One is that the tree canopy establishment, we're really talking about a true nature-based solution, not just an engineered kind of gray infrastructure. Trees are, through evapotranspiration, through the fixing of potential pollutant loads, they are working 24/7, or at least during the day to really kind of mitigate stormwater quantity and quality. So I think that's worth looking at. The other reason to add a 1.5 is to account for the synergistic effects of establishing a whole stand of trees. The way that we are calculating based on the planting manual, the zoning ordinance here that we're discussing, that's just per tree. And we certainly do get cumulative effects as we establish multiple stands in a stand. I think the last thing is kind of to acknowledge what Director Martin just made clear there, that we're not tying this to any kind of incentive in terms of stormwater management fees. So people who do this are not going to be seeing a recalculation potentially like they would be from reducing their impervious surface number. So another way to kind of account for that. I can tell you, again, subjectively, that it's my professional opinion that multiplier could be several times what it is there before we talk about it being goofy, So,
Sit by landscape.
So at that meeting, the Water Quality Fees Board voted to give Division of Water Quality staff a month to study all the details of Geomancer's proposal and make sure that it wasn't going to break the grant program or anything like that. And then we met again a month later.
During the January 12th meeting, citizen Leander Nachi Braga, representing Geomancer Permaculture and the Lexington Tree Board, presented materials to the board in support of adding tree canopy expansion to the scoring matrix for Class B infrastructure stormwater grants. The proposal letter dated January the 12th, 2023 is attached to this recommendation.
Now, Frank, I love you, but because you mispronounced my name, I am going to play this clip of you stumbling over the word evapotranspiration.
Deception and this word always throws me, excuse me. Evapotranspiration of stormwater, removing no.
But don't worry, because Frank was definitely not the only one.
What transpiration.
It's not the easiest word, but again, I cannot stress how important evapotranspiration is to the continuation of life on this planet. And so if we can codify it into government policy in some way, even just in a small way, this then becomes precedent that we can use in the future so that we can increasingly bring awareness to the fact that trees should be valued as public infrastructure. Not only did the Division of Water Quality staff recommend approval of our proposal, they also agreed with the use of the 1.5 times coefficient for the valuation of tree canopy, and used the same logic that I had presented in the previous meeting.
The multiplier for the Class BI score sheet is an acknowledgement from Division of Water Quality of the benefits of trees and the management of stormwater quantity and quality. The multiplier incentivizes applications proposing tree canopy plantings since these projects will not see a reduction in their water quality management fee. Impervious removal and associated BMPs depreciate an ability to treat and infiltrate stormwater without exceptional maintenance efforts, while the stormwater benefits of trees increase with time. And then we referenced see Table A.
By now, we had some pretty good momentum going, so I just kind of kept my mouth shut at this second meeting so as to not jeopardize the process underway. But we did have Heather Wilson attend. She is the manager of Lexington's urban forestry program. She's a certified arborist, an expert in her field, and she was able to speak, from a good deal of expertise with regard to the value of evapotranspiration and the fact that we should be considering trees in some of these programs.
I think that speaks highly if you have somebody in Irving County government supporting the position that you're presenting this to.
I gotta say, one of the coolest things about this whole process was getting to watch the arborists from Division of Environmental Services give advice to the engineers from Division of Water Quality. And I bet there are all kinds of synergies like that just waiting to be found in all local governments. And sometimes the most effective thing that we can do as environmental advocates is to look for those opportunities to foster communications between groups that maybe weren't already talking to each other. There was even a professional landscape architect at the meeting from one of the largest design firms in town. They wanted to see how this proposal might affect their work. And this then led to my being invited to their big downtown office to explain the proposal and our thinking behind it. And so all of this has served to raise the profile of Geomancer as a design project here locally, which is pretty cool. So, as you can probably guess, the board did vote to implement our proposal, but as a one-year pilot program, which is why I'm only making a video about it now. Because in 2024, the Lexington Water Quality Fees Board voted to make our tree canopy incentives permanent. And this is amazing because whereas in the past tree plantings had been shoved in some sort of environmental education line item, now urban tree canopy establishment is a core component of nearly every application. And we have people like the sustainability coordinator of our public school system saying that this policy change will inevitably lead to more tree canopy establishment on our campuses. So I'm very happy about this. But the last thing that I want to say is that I could see how someone might criticize us for doing this and say, how can you claim that Geomancer is a revolutionary organization when you're fiddling around in the minutia of local government policy? And so I want to respond to that by saying that first of all, the material benefits of urban tree canopy are genuinely incalculable. And if I quit tomorrow, if this was the end of my whole permaculture career, this might have actually been enough. This is a really interesting case of how I could be out there as an individual planting trees for the rest of my life and maybe still not have had as much of a positive effect as we can achieve through moving some numbers around on a spreadsheet, messing around with little policies like this. I also want to caution you to not underestimate the kind of momentum that we can build through little victories in this manner towards building a different kind of politics altogether. So, with that said, I want to say thank you to all of our patrons, all of our subscribers, and particularly to you for making it to the end of a really niche video about government policy. But I hope that it's inspiring. I hope that it's useful for whatever you want to do in your community.
Thank you. This is a very good recommendation. We appreciate you taking time and effort to put this together.
Thank you all for your leadership. I really think this is pretty significant. Just thank you so much.
So it's a win-win, I think.